are showing clear ideas about what should happen or what could be done in the future. Having or showing a powerful imagination. And the three individuals I have the pleasure of introducing are just that, visionaries. Please welcome to the stage, author of The End of Storytelling and the upcoming Quantum Narratives book, Stephanie Riggs. And founder of Bigscreen, Darshan Shankar. And the founder of Anduril Industries and Oculus VR, Palmer Luckey.
All right, AWE 15, you guys are looking good. 15 years. We're gonna talk hardware, we're gonna talk software, we're gonna talk content, but let's start with a little story. For everyone here that might not know your flashpoint of when you got into VR, and I don't mean just like the first time you put a headset on, but like what was the setting? What was it like when you first had that flashpoint with VR? So for example, I would be going down into a deep, dark basement in Ween Hall on Carnegie Mellon campus, and there's probably hard drives with illegally downloaded songs from Napster and CRT things, and you put a headset on. So, who wants to start first with your flashpoint?
Well, as most people know, I wasn't even born 15 years ago. But I built my first VR headset in 2009. Actually, barely 2 miles from here in Long Beach. So I'm glad AWE has come to Long Beach. This is really the right place for it to be, in my opinion. At the time I was, I started Oculus a few years later after I built several more prototypes. And the first prototype, what became the Rift, I created in 2011. I was 19 years old, living in a camper trailer. And it was the first prototype where I showed it to my friends. And rather than saying, Palmer, this is shit, you're wasting your time, they said, oh, this is shit, but I can imagine it going somewhere. Maybe you're not wasting your time. And that was actually my good friend Chris had that realization. And I asked him what he was going to be doing that summer. And he said, oh, I'm going to be working at this pizza place, trying to save up money before I go to college. I said, no, you're not. We're going to start Oculus together, and you're going to come work for me. And that was on a Friday. And then he told his mom he was moving in with his friend from the internet to start a virtual reality company. And I think she didn't believe him, because that was like really all the context he gave her. On Monday, I rolled up in my Pontiac, Montana minivan, and he got in with all of his stuff, and he drove away, and he never went home. And that was the start of Oculus. Actually, yeah, one last bit is, I wish I could point and say, you guys should go to the Seaport Marina Hotel, because that's where we lived for the first 3 months of Oculus, building headsets for all of the conferences we went to. But unfortunately, it was condemned shortly after we left, and has since been destroyed and replaced with a mall.
So my story is probably a couple of years after that. In 2011, 2012, I was obviously like Kickstarter DK1, playing with the DK1, but at that point, there weren't huge software opportunities. A lot of the problems left to be solved in VR at that point were still on the hardware side, and getting controllers, getting tracking, getting 6-stop, getting to market. The DK2 comes out by 2014, and it was abundantly clear at that point that something interesting would happen. There was very interesting software and gaming applications that could be built, and it was only a matter of time for it to be a consumer device. Shortly after that, after getting the DK2, I immediately started working on it full-time, building what Bigscreen is today. So we have software that's been on every VR headset since 2016. I started working on it in 2014, shipped the first version in 2016 on the Rift and the Vive on Steam, and we've been on every VR headset since then.
I'm going to keep you back in time for a little bit before we move to today, since AWE's theme is like going back in history. So that flashpoint moment that you had, is that still what you're building today?
Exact same thing, except a couple years later, we were like, we probably need to build hardware too. But the software and the vision around what we see is most interesting in VR and what's missing in VR is the exact same vision we are still chasing today.
I mean, these days I'm focusing a lot of my time on lethal autonomous weapon systems, which is quite different. I did build that VR headset that can kill you, so I guess there's overlap there. But my original vision of building a VR headset that would actually be mainstream, that could actually be consumer, like that people think that was my original vision, but it's worth remembering. When I launched the original Oculus VR website, you can go back and read it on the Wayback Machine. I'm clearly trying to sell a do-it-yourself kit for VR enthusiasts, and I just didn't think that VR was quite ready to go beyond that. You were literally gonna have to build it yourself. I was gonna send people the parts and have software libraries, but you were gonna have to actually assemble it, solder all the power cables on. And I got some good advice from actually John Carmack and also Gabe Newell and a few other people that I showed it to, and they said, you need to build something that software developers can just use. And software developers don't know how to build things with their hands. They know how to build things with their keyboards. And so you need to give them something that actually works out of the box. And that was actually a huge change from everything I had in my mind up till that point. It's a good thing that we made that change, because I don't think, actually, I know this for certain. On our Kickstarter, we had an option for you could have a build-it-yourself kit or an assembled kit. I think there was a $1 difference in price, and I think we had less than 100 people buy the do-it-yourself kit, and we had many thousands of people want the one they built them, that was already built for them. So
you bring up a good point, though. It's we don't build in isolation, right? We surround ourselves with people that help us make good decisions, help us make the right decisions, hopefully.
And that are specialized in things. I mean, specialization of labor is what makes humanity work. If everybody had to do everything, if I had to grow my own food and clean my own plumbing and build my own car, I would have a much lower standard for all of those things than if I can allow someone to specialize in each.
Darshan, who have you surrounded yourself with to help you make the right decisions?
Similar,
on the journey?
just really smart people. Whether it's for the software that we're building or the hardware that we've since built, it's just finding really, really smart people. Whether it's asking Palmer for certain advice on things, or Carmack, or plenty of other people, many of whom came from Oculus and started Oculus. It's been very helpful to be surrounded by people who have just been in the game for a long time.
Right. For people that haven't been in the game for a long time, where do you find these people? I mean, are you just emailing John Carmack?
I think if you do interesting things and you go show people the interesting things that you're actually making and the interesting ideas that you have, the research that you've done, regardless of your age or whether you have funding or not, other smart people want to help you naturally. Just on Monday night, we had a Bigscreen Beyond customer and community member come over, 17-year-old kid, really, really smart, and showing things that he has built that work, that are really interesting ideas. And you don't have to have a lot of fun. You don't need to know people. You just go do interesting things and people will want to help you.
But I will note, you noted that he's 17, and then you said regardless of age, but we've talked about this, but my strong opinion is one of the most valuable assets you have as a young person is your age. People want to help you when you're young. They'll respond to I'm not saying you can send bad emails and they'll help you. You need to be specific, here's what I'm doing, here's why it's interesting, here's why I think you could help me, and here's what I'm looking for you as help. Don't just say, I'd like to speak with you. What's a good time? That's not going to work. But if you can be more specific, people want to help young kids. The younger, the better. When I get an email from somebody who's 15, I want to help them. If they're 14, I really want to help them. And I benefited this from my early career so much. I think John Carmack, one of the reasons he was willing to humor me and talk with me is because I was an 18 and then 19-year-old kid. When you're a whiz kid, everyone wants to talk to you. Once you're a whiz man, nobody cares.
With ladies out there too.
So if there's any young kids out there, go and ask for all the intros you're gonna need before you get too old, or you'll be like me and nobody's gonna be responding to your emails anymore.
But Darshan, you bring up also a good point about doing your research and looking there's something about having an idea moving forward, but grounding it in what's come before and doing your research. And I mean, you did a ton of research early on, Palmer. You're probably digging into the archives of things to find out what have people done, what has failed. Where did you go to look for that research to ground where you're moving forward to?
I read every single bit of published literature I could find on VR. I mean all of it. I was just downloading into my brain, like I was in the Matrix.
Like IEEE, SIGGRAPH.
So like old IEEE and SIGGRAPH papers, but also a lot of old Navy research documents, a lot of old Army research documents. Some of the stuff had been declassified, some of it had never been classified. But remember, there's a huge amount of government and academic and commercial investment in VR. And I was also trying to buy a lot of these artifacts. Before I started Oculus, I had the world's largest virtual reality headset collection. I had over 89 headsets. No, not overnight. I had exactly 89 headsets the day that I launched the Oculus Kickstarter, and I had stuff from the 80s, the 90s, I had NASA stuff, military stuff. I was buying it for pennies on the dollar, and a lot of it I took apart and then put back together so I could learn what worked and what didn't. I mean, if you don't know what people have done before, you're gonna make exactly the same mistakes. You're not gonna make different mistakes, you'll make the exact same ones. If you learn from them, you get to make brand new mistakes. And that's what you wanna be doing every day, new mistakes.
And I think similarly, for us, by the time we were getting started in VR, we were just a few years later, right? So there's plenty of literature already out there. There's plenty of content that people are making, or hardware that people are making, so things that we can learn from. So again, similarly, just talking to interesting people and building things. So when we get into hardware and Bigscreen's pivot, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, we didn't go to people, I didn't talk to people like, hey, we want to go make hardware, what do you think? How do I do it? It's like, no, like I've done my research before. I've gone deep into whether it's optics or displays or tracking or how does VR work. Not like a Wikipedia article of how does VR work, but like actually understanding from software through graphics cards and output to displays and optics, the full stack, top to bottom. So go do your homework and start to figure out what's missing. Go talk to customers, go talk to users. And it helped for us that we were building and shipping VR software for so many years that we know what's missing. We use VR every day. You can tell, okay, these are the missing problems. This is what customers want. This is what I want. Here's how the technology works. And then when I reach out to, say, Palmer or Carmack or Jerry from Till 5 or a few other people like Nirav from Framework, these are people who have built and shipped successfully consumer hardware before. But then my questions are hyper-targeted. Like, here is a question I have about this problem that I'm dealing with. Do you have advice about this one thing? Not, hey, can we grab coffee sometime in a few months if you're free?
So what's the best answer you've ever gotten to one of those? The questions, do you have an answer? Has there ever been a, nah, don't have an answer? Why don't you find out what it is?
I think the interesting ones for me were when people challenged my assumptions. Like I would assume, well, we did this and this, but to get to the next stage, we really need to do that. And multiple people are like, no, you probably don't. Maybe you're doing it right already.
I give bad answers all the time, but I usually try to caveat them. Like, here's this problem. I started the company when I was 19, and I happened to be working on something that was feasible for the first time really at a major scale because computers were better, because displays were better, because motion trackers were better. And so I happened to be doing the right thing at the right time. And then there's this huge group of people that understands that's because I was doing the right thing at the right time. And then there's other people who believe that it's due to some innate, insight that I must have. And they say, Palmer, what's the secret? If you could distill the secret of building a business into one line, what is it? I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm 31 years old. Like I'm still figuring this out too. And Palmer, what do you think about large language models? And I say, dude, I don't know. That's not what I work on. And I'll tell them, I'll just make stuff up. Like I can give you my opinion, but I've given lots of it. I liked your point about you should ask a specific question that's hyper-targeted at someone's expertise, because otherwise you're like, Nirav, very early employee at Oculus. He was our hardware lead, and he's gone to start Framework, and they're building an incredible laptop and some other stuff too, so you should really check it out. Now, Nirav is incredible at that. But, like, I probably wouldn't ask Nirav for help with like television appearances. No offense to Nirav, but like, it's not, that hasn't been core to his strategy. And there's other people I wouldn't want their opinion on how to build a hardware company or a manufacturing team, but I absolutely would want their opinion on how do I come across well in the 1 minute that I'm going to get on CNBC. And so that I think is key. You really need to hyper target your questions. Be very specific about how people can help you, because there's a lot I can't help you with.
All right, so I'm going to hyper target a question here. What were you doing yesterday at 3:24? We're bringing it into the present now. Yesterday at 3:24, what were you doing?
I think I was at the Reality Hack booth, checking out what they were doing there. I don't know if any of you guys are out there. Woo! But that's a lot of fun. Look, this gets back to all the young people. They get all the attention. Everybody wants to help the kids. That's what I was doing.
Yesterday, 3/24, we were actually getting our LA team together. So we have a factory that we own and operate here in LA, and we were getting the team together to celebrate. Because a year ago, we announced Bigscreen Beyond, our first generation VR headset, and we have now successfully shipped it. We started shipping last August, and we've been very busy these past 9 months building and shipping.
You should show it to people. Because I think a lot of people...
We have suspensefully put items on the table, like a good dramatic cliffhanger here. What is on the table?
All right. So, we got two things. Hang on.
We get close up on that.
Yeah, that photo shoot with Wired, the guy who did all these great pictures, and they put really nice makeup on me, and I didn't have bags under my eyes, and they said, just for this one, just make like a scowl, like you really get really mad, and I did it, and that was, this covers when I learned you don't have to do what the photographer tells you, just tell him no. And they put these like Palpatine bags under my eyes, and they're like, this guy, he's gonna destroy the world with his VR. Anyway, so there's that bit. Then the other bit is I have one of the first DK1s that was ever made, and it's just interesting. It's been 10 years ago. You couldn't buy a DK2 yet, so this was kind of the best you could get, and it weighs 349 grams, and it had a resolution nominally of 800 by 640 per eye, but actually due to panel utilization, you were getting about 60% of those actually active pixels. And it's kind of crazy how far we've come. I mean, I think people don't understand how far things have come, where you're able to ship, there we go. So this thing weighs barely over 100 grams. It's a third of the weight. It is 20 times as many pixels. Sometimes when people say, oh man, it seems like VR is not really moving, it seems like it's kind of stuck in time, that's how I know that they're not in the VR industry. Because if you're in the VR industry, dude, you can buy a headset, it's 20 times higher resolution, and it's only been 10 years. I mean, 10 years is a long time, but when people think that things aren't moving, it's because they see it from the outside. And what they really mean is, it's not as popular as the Nintendo Wii yet. But I mean, you had, Oculus Quest sold almost 20 million units in 1 year. That's better sales than the Nintendo 64 was getting during its very best year of sales ever. That's better than the first 2 years of iPhone sales managed to pull by a lot. It's just, VR's actually come a really long way. It's just people's expectations of what success is. They've really inflated. I mean, you've been working on this stuff for a long time. Could you imagine if you had told people, there's going to be 20 million people buying a VR headset, and the media is going to consider that a failure? Wouldn't that just blow people's minds?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard to get people to go down into a dungeon basement to put a brick on their face. And I mean, I produced the first feature film that was released on the DK1, and the content side of things, it's awesome to see all the hardware evolution and the software evolution. The content side of things, I think, there are some challenges in really radically approaching how we're approaching content and the usability and the UI factors. But I mean, this is phenomenal, Darshan. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Oh, and the reason I forgot, this is the June 2014 issue of Wired, so it's actually been exactly 10 years since this thing came out. So it says that it's about to change gaming, movies, TV, music, design, medicine, sex, sports, art, travel, social networking, education, and reality itself. So I guess my question is, has it done that yet? I don't know. I think we're still waiting, but it's a good headline. It's a good headline for sure.
But also, how many DK1s were sold?
We sold 55,000 DK1s total, but I have about 1,000 of those on pallets in my storage unit.
And what about DK2 in 2014?
So I don't know if we've ever publicly said this, but
a couple 100,000.
It was about 250,000. So. And the big difference there is in DK2, I mean, DK2 was the first good VR headset. Okay, DK1 was a vehicle for people who understood and could extrapolate to understand where this was going. But the low persistence displays, the much improved optics, mostly the 6 degree of freedom tracking, all in a product you could actually buy. It was the first good VR headset. And people, and I know we said, if you guys remember, if you were ordering one back then, you remember you had to check the little boxes. I am a game developer. I am not a consumer, and I understand there is not consumer level support for this device. People were buying it just to play games on Steam. I mean, that was pretty cool. And by the way, the reason that we did 55,000 of them was because up to that point, the best-selling head-mounted display of all time was what do we call it in the U.S.? It was the Philips Scuba, or in Japan, it was marketed as the Tatara Dino Visor. that sold exactly 50,000 units, and I happened to know that from doing my market research, and I knew that if we did 55,000, that would guarantee we were the best-selling VR headset of all time, even if Oculus completely collapsed and fell. I'm glad we did that. Luckily, we didn't collapse and fail, by some definition of collapse and fail, I suppose.
And then 10 years later, now Gorilla Tech has 1 million daily active users.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to believe.
I feel like that's one of those things that people in the outskirts of VR, right outside VR, like, VR never really took off. It was just a thing and never really went anywhere. It's like, no, there's 1 million people playing Gorilla Tag every single day.
And part of what's happened is again, I said this earlier, but the expectation of what success is has so massively expanded. Like, people forget that they're only, like, in the US, they're only something like, I think it's like 27 million Nintendo 64s sold, and everyone agreed, like, that was a cultural icon and everyone remembers using one. Like, it's just that the bar for success has been changed by phones that sell hundreds of millions of units every single year, by companies that'll ship 1 billion devices in a year. MediaTek, the company that builds these embedded processors, I think on their website it's more, McDonald's is like, billions and billions sold. I think MediaTek has been in 33 billion devices, and it's just mind-boggling. So VR is just trying to catch up.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at these headset devices, but you started out as a software company, and I think that all of these pieces, the software, the hardware, the content play together. It's like, yeah, you're shipping hardware devices, but there's stuff on there that people are engaging with and interacting with and are keeping them coming back. So you started on the software side. How did you get to the hardware side?
Well, it started with a vision of, I think, what we wanted to be able to do with VR. And after a couple years of shipping it on Rift and then Go and Quest and so on, we kept hitting walls. Walls due to platform policies that are stupid, and people at Power that were just creating needless barriers to be able to innovate. For example, if you want to do something, send us a pitch deck, or no, we have the data, that's not interesting. It's like, no, get out of the way, like, we're developers, we're going to go make interesting things. But also hardware, because we thought people weren't building the devices that needed to exist. So every headset that was about 350 grams in 2014, CV1 was probably about the same, 300-ish grams.
It got a little heavier, but yeah.
Yeah, in that ballpark. But ever since then, it started dramatically increasing in weight, especially once you got to Quest class standalone devices. That's 550 plus grams. Vision Pro now, a decade later, at 700 plus grams, and that's without the battery. So once the battery's off of you, but if it happened to actually be on your face, that's a kilogram. But 700 grams on your face, I feel like there's a lot of disrespect for VR users from people making hardware and designing hardware. And the disrespect, I think, starts because they're not actually using the hardware. It's mostly people with billions of dollars to play with who don't use VR, but are thinking about it more from well, this is the next platform, let's own the next one, we have to do some R&D on it. But I don't think a lot of the people who are making decisions about what should be or not be in a device, I don't think they probably haven't used VR chat ever, I'll put it that way, right?
They probably haven't used VR at all in the last month. Oh, I said it. I said the forbidden truth.
I feel like
it's the same way on the content side. It's like you've got the same people that have made something for a different platform, trying to port it over and not realizing that there are different affordances on this new platform.
Meanwhile, I'm just doing the same thing. I've been a hardware guy all along, and so I'm just going to keep doing that.
Yeah. And I feel like we had a very strong opinion about what needed to happen. So instead of going heavier and heavier and heavier, we went lighter. So from the first day in which we really embarked seriously on hardware, we had a philosophy called every gram matters, something that we have adhered to very strictly. And that's why our device is now 127 grams. We said no to a lot of things, and I think there are a lot of hardware designers or executives that aren't saying no enough, but instead are chasing maybe a theoretical vision of where the industry could go.
And I'm gonna circle us back into today. Palmer, I think it's kind of cool actually where you've gone, because it is actually full circle. Like, a lot of our funding in the 90s came from DARPA. Like, this industry that we all know and love so much was very much funded and supported by the US government to begin with, and you're almost like full circle going back to that. But if you were, let's say, to start today in the VR industry with zero priors, what would you do?
Oh, that's interesting. You know, and it's not just like DARPA and DoD with VR in general, even me specifically. So I don't know if everyone knows this, but I worked at the USC ICT Mixed Reality Lab before starting Oculus, and that's an Army affiliate research center doing all kinds of stuff between the Army and Hollywood. So, yeah, I mean that was really important, even just for what I've done personally. So they've kept it alive in general, but they kind of kept it alive for me and got me exposed to a lot of things I never would have been exposed to otherwise. You know, I'm still very much in the hardware space. I'm actually building a new headset right now. It's driven by it's driven by military requirements, but it's also going to be used for non-military stuff, and it's really cool. It's really something. I've been going around telling people that I'm doing it because if they don't know you're working on a headset, then you only get to talk to people that you reach out to. Like I can reach out to you, and that's great, but until everybody knows you're working on something, you're not going to get the people reaching out to you, particularly the younger people, the newer people, the smaller companies that you don't even know about. They're not going to reach out to you unless they know that you're actually doing something. So if you've got things like structured light-based systems that are above 1200 nanometers, up to 1550 nanometers would be great. That'd be really, really great for light security reasons. But you know, I'm loving what I'm doing VR now for some cool military stuff. But if I was starting again with no priors, you know, I'm doing what I'm doing because I've started a defense technology company. If I was starting from nothing and I had absolutely none of my network, none of my money, I'd want to find an area where I could punch above my weight. And I know you know this, we talked about it before. I think it would be an adult entertainment. Let me get like the thing is, that's a very broad area. But most of the big companies will refuse to compete in that area. And so it's something where if you're starting with nothing, you'll punch way above your weight. The people who should be competing with you refuse to do it because they've got their eyes on bigger prizes, like being the dominant gaming platform, which they think being in adult entertainment would hurt. They want to be the VR device that's in every single school, and they know that would potentially be bad for them. But you know, adult entertainment is a broad space. There's a lot of different things. You know, like the Army was researching teledildonics for years to help deployed troops reconnect with their spouses and
Wait, explain what that is?
Teledildonics. It's self-explanatory.
Do you guys know what this is?
But
oh, okay, gotcha.
I mean, so you know, like, a lot of this is not even. It doesn't mean like adult VR doesn't necessarily mean like Pornhub VR. There's a huge, vast breadth of human experience that's contained in that the big companies just aren't going to touch. So I don't know. Maybe I would come to a different conclusion. But if I was starting from scratch, I would look and say, like, okay, if I'm starting a new hardware company, like a new headset company, I'm up against a lot of great people with a lot of money and a lot of talent. If I do a new game, same thing. I'm going to be up against some really, really sharp people. Adult entertainment, it's kind of a wasteland, and I bet I could do pretty well. It's not what I'm going to be doing. Nobody write the story saying that I'm starting that, but you know, like, and I think that's also one of the things that everybody wants it. Some people are like, oh, but only dudes would want it. No, I've seen Outlander. I know what that is. That's for chicks, and you know, it's very much this category. Or Bridgerton. I know what that is. That's just British-themed pornography for women.
So wait, are you saying that the biggest play space right now in the VR is in the content side of things?
I think that's where the biggest opportunity is coming from the outside. I hate to say, as someone who is playing in the hardware space is where some of the most important gains can be had, but I would be very loath as a newcomer to come in and say, I think I can do it. I think the hardware game is a game for people who have gotten their feet under them and have a network and people trust them and they're willing to make a bet on them. I mean, you know this, like, you couldn't have built that if that was the first thing that you built. You were able to do it because you already had trust from a network, also money coming in to help you do it from something that actually made sense. Anyway, that's what I would do.
Okay, top that, Darshan, go.
There is, just piggybacking off of that, there is no way we could have done hardware without having done software first. It also taught us so much about what hardware needed. We would have built really dumb hardware if we didn't build software for a long time.
Would you even say that there's people building hardware today that may have done that? You may say that. It may even be said. Some people are saying, I know it, you know it, everybody knows it.
Yep. I think getting into hardware was pretty hard, brutally hard, and very, very risky. However, I think the thing that I would do if I was starting completely from scratch today with none of the knowledge that I have right now in software or hardware for VR would be the thing that I think is the scariest, most ambitious, which would be in gaming, in VR gaming. Particularly because I still believe that the best games for people to play still haven't even been created. That being said, I'm terrified by it just because there is an enormous amount of competition in games for VR, because the consumer who, whether you have a Quest or whatever headset that you've got, you've got so much choice. You've got choice outside of VR. You've got an enormous amount of entertainment options, and we're living in a renaissance of gaming. There has never been this much amazing gaming content for you to play, whether in VR or not. However, there are still so few incredible titles for people to play every day after school. And I think that's a very exciting opportunity. And it doesn't take a lot of people. Some of the best games for VR were typically made by 1 to 10 people without very much funding at all. So the number of studios that are spending tens of millions of dollars or more, it doesn't have to be that way at all. And I think it's just a very, very interesting space, because there's also a huge user base now in the VR industry that wasn't there a long time ago. So if you build something interesting, you can build a massive business off of it.
So I'm seeing a common theme in scary and ambitious.
And what about you? What would you be doing if you were starting from scratch? No priors, no network, no money?
I would probably be doing exactly what I'm doing right now. I think that the narrative tech field has not been able to advance as radically as software or as hardware, and I think that there is definitely a challenge to resolving the narrative paradox. Narrative paradox, yeah.
I only know what the narrative paradox is because you explained it to me, so I get to not. Yes, the narrative paradox.
So the narrative.
The more interactivity that you have, the harder it is to tell a story and to create a narrative, and vice versa.
Yes, the conflict between the linear pre-authored content and the interactive gaming content, and resolving that in a truly generative way. And it's something I've been thinking about for probably decades, since I came into VR in an interactive space with a classical storytelling background. So I'm hoping to push that forward a little bit.
Well, it'd be fun to come back in 10 years and you can maybe help tell the narrative story of how VR got to being with 1 billion people. That's fingers crossed, right guys? 1 billion people, 10 years?
Yeah, I think we got the hardware, software, content combo here that can make it happen. Let's do it. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Darshan. Thank you, Palmer.
We love all of you.
Thank you.
What an incredible session, everyone. I just have to let you know that Palmer will not be around. Sonia has to whisk him away, but we have a phenomenal panel coming up, so stay tuned.